New at 5, the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors held their first public meeting today since last week's election.
Many people showed up to voice their concerns and frustrations with some of the voting machines on Election Day. Derek Stahl joins us live from the newsroom with more. Derek?
Well, good evening. More than 30 people showed up to sound off during today's meeting. Most were there to express some concerns over the election process, but others actually showed up just to thank the board. Some speakers made unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud. Others, including some poll workers, just wanted to express concerns about the problems with the printers that caused some ballot counting machines to spit out errors on Election Day. There was also some talk about the speed at which Maricopa County ballots were counted.
If Florida has 12.4 million more people who live in it than Maricopa or Arizona in general, and they can count their ballots in 5 hours under hurricane watch, and we are on day 9, we've got problems that we need to address.
There's been times when I've not liked the outcome of the elections, but throughout all of it, I have seen and I have studied and I've watched closely, and I've seen that these elections have been administered fairly, they've been administered efficiently, they've been administered justly.
Maricopa County officials have confirmed time and again every legal ballot will be counted in this election. Right now, we're still waiting on a winner in 2 of our state's biggest races, Attorney General and State Superintendent. Those are both still too close to call. One of them is just a difference of about 700 votes right now. Nicole?